Hey there, welcome back to 110. And today we're going to be talking about chapter 7. And surprisingly enough, I love interpersonal. I love talking about romantic relationships, friendships, all of that. But weirdly, talking and listening chapter is my favorite chapter. Now, this is a pretty lengthy chapter, I'll tell you. And so I am going to cover a lot that we have within our textbook. But just please know that I would give this chapter like a little bit extra more time. So, talking and listening, I don't know why I love it. I just love thinking about listening and how important it is with our relationships. You want to think like, okay, like everybody knows how to have a conversation. But have you ever had a conversation with someone who was clearly not paying attention to you? And it's so annoying. They're not looking at you, maybe they're looking around. And so you have to think in order for something to be a conversation, a conversation, it's not a monologue. It's not one person just venting out to another person for minutes upon minutes. You got to think it's this dyadic process. Remember, dyad means two. So usually two people, they're engaging with interactions with one another, and there's multiple turns. So I'm talking, and then you listen, and then you start talking. We're taking turns, thinking about each other, talking about whatever's happening. And this is such an important part of our interpersonal experience. This is how we build relationships and we maintain them and how we even end them. We need conversation. It's a reciprocal and it's that rhythmic interchange. And I really, really like this last bullet point on here, thinking that it's kind of like musical in a sense. I talk, then you talk, we take turns, and we're listening to each other and sharing our thoughts and ideas in a space where like you feel comfortable and appreciated. A good conversation can really like change your day and you like feel good about it. Now I want to ask you, so we're really focusing a lot about how we're taking turns with this, right? With this conversation. But what about technology? I think about the people that I text throughout the day. I definitely text a few of my best friends. I text my partner, and we take turns talking to each other. Now, can this be a good thing? But could it also be a bad thing? Because sometimes I get too busy, and then all of a sudden, this conversation we were having via text, I like forgot to reply. And now it's a few hours later. And maybe my friend or partner are like, what happened here? Where did you go? Right? I do want to take note in your book on page 219. There's this example, and I want to share it with you. And it says, talking about specifically millennials and what's wrong with like our nation and technology and getting close to each other. There's this direct quote that says, I'll tell you what's wrong with having a conversation. It takes place in real time, and you can't control what you're going to say. So that's the bottom line. Texting, email, posting, all of these things let us present the self we want to be. What you think? How many times are you sending a text message and you start deleting whatever you wrote? Or how many times that you post something and you think like, oh, I don't want to do that, so maybe you edit it or you delete it. We have become so addicted to our technology that we edit out everything. But the fascinating thing about conversations is that you can't really edit it out. There's no filters. We're just talking, and yeah, we have time to think about what we want to say. But as your book says, you can't control what you're going to say. I kind of argue that you can a little bit, but yeah, sometimes we can't, and we just like automatically start responding. I really love this question, and I would love to know more about what you think. But do you think technology is good or bad for conversations? We can totally play the it depends game, what type of context is happening, who the person is to you. But can technology be a good way for us to kind of manage and maintain and terminate relationships, right? That's just not thinking about it. So check this out. We have four different types of conversations here. You can see this diagram from your book. I really love it. I just wanted to focus more on it than my own written notes here. But you can see we start at the bottom with discourse, the orange one. I want you to think that this one is one way. So see how the bottom two, those are both one way. And then we are cooperative. So one way means only one person is sending a message to you, and we are both being cooperative. And I know that I'm the one talking, and you're the one that's listening. Through this discourse, I want you to think about teaching, lecturing, teaching and thinking that I'm up here talking to you, I'm lecturing, and you're being cooperative and you're listening. Now we do have dialogue, so that's just above where it's two-way now. So we are both actively participating in the conversation and we're being cooperative. We're having a good conversation with one another. I think your book says here, thinking about questions you ask on a first date. I want you to think about a first date, the things you talk about, the questions you're taking turns asking, and you're actually like engaged in wondering how they're going to answer. You're part of it. It's a dialogue. Then we have debate, which is still two ways. We're both actively part of this, but now it's competitive. So debate, you want to win an argument, you want to persuade someone on your values or your beliefs. You're trying to like win. Can you see the difference here between competitive and cooperative? Cooperative, we're engaging in this conversation together. Competitive now, there's kind of like an end game of me winning. Now, this last one, it involves emotional expressions. This one, I want you to think that, you know, maybe someone disagrees with you. This is one way. I'm only going to share it like to myself and my emotions and my nonverbal that's being competitive. Your book says specifically you want to express emotions, you want to browbeat those that disagree you, and or inspires those that share the same perspective. I want you to think to yourself, for example, that your best friend has come over to your house and they want to vent to you about a grade they got in a test. This is one way because they're venting to you and it's being competitive in the sense that like they need the like attention right now and they're trying to really like get down into their emotions about why they're feeling a certain way. It's not really cooperative in a sense of like, what do you think about me doing bad on my test? That's not the way we're going to engage in this conversation. Instead, they're a one-way focus of like, I need to share these emotional expressions. So these are four types of conversations that people have. And then we kind of get a little bit deeper into it about like, why do we need to communicate? And so we communicate plain and simple for social and practical needs. We are social creatures and we need to like talk to people. When we don't talk to people for a while, we start to feel a little lonely. I always like to ask everybody, like, how long do you like to have those days where you just like stay at home all day? I know sometimes on the weekend on Sunday, maybe I'll stay home all day. I don't go outside and I just get to like watch my TV shows, play my games, read, take in everything, shower, all of that. And hey, I enjoy that. But then maybe come the second day, it's like, I gotta get out. I gotta go talk to someone. I gotta go to the grocery store, maybe go to a coffee shop. I need some communication. And so that's why I think communication needs social and practical needs. If you need something done, thinking about work. And so we initiate, maintain, and terminate relationships. You can be personal, you can be professional as well. But these are the 6 reasons that research has shown us why we need to communicate. We communicate because we want to control a situation. We want something to be done a certain way. We communicate because it's relaxing. I look at this as like I like to talk to my mom on Fridays. I go when they see her, and it's like it's relaxing to be able to talk to her about my week, talk to her about what's going on. We do have escape here, which I think is kind of interesting to think when you're venting to someone and they help you kind of think about it differently. And so you want to escape the real world and talk to someone about it. We have inclusion of us feeling wanted and belonging, and then affection of showing love towards others, as well as with pleasure. We communicate all these ways for our relationships. We need to communicate. You can go a little bit without it, but you're going to end up really wanting it, right? Which gets us into self disclosure, sharing personal information. All of those 6, we kind of get into like some intimate topics with one another, and that involves sharing our thoughts and our feelings and what's going on. So, self disclosure, here's our definition for it. It's the process of purposefully, keyword here, purposefully communicating information about yourself. I want you to think about when you're on a first date. How much information do you like to share about yourself? You know, I have this example here. It says different people self-disclose for different reasons. So if you're on a first date, you're self-disclosing because you want to see what this person's going to think about you. Do they relate to you? Do they like the same things as you? And then you can kind of think like, do I want to continue seeing them? You might think too if you're at work and you're not really going to be self-disclosing too much information. But as time goes by, of course, you're going to self-disclose a little bit more every time. But self-disclosure is deciding how much do I want to share with you? Have you ever had someone trauma dump on you on the first time you met them? And it's kind of a lot to take in. And it's like, I don't know how I feel about this, right? So it was like TMI, too much information. That's a real thing when it comes to this. I'm going to talk to you about two different theories, and this is the first one. Now, it's sounded mean because your book doesn't really put a lot of emphasis on EVT. So I want to put a lot of emphasis on it because it's one of the most popular theories here in the communication field. EVT, which is expectancy violation theory, looks at how people are going to understand interpersonal interactions and how people can violate norms. Here's my example for that. You're on a first date. Again, you're always on first dates in here. And I want you to think that your date starts asking you really, really personal questions. You know, they might ask you like, oh, tell me about your family. Do you have any siblings? When's the last time you cried? And say, oh, you violated the norm of this interaction. You know, the norm of this interaction is small talk, getting to know each other. When you violate it, you know, it's going to make it difficult for me to think what's appropriate here. Now, I have this word highlighted, and I really want some emphasis here on this word about predicting. Now, with EVT, it's all about predicting because the better you know someone, the better you are to be able to predict how they're going to react in situations. It says here, EVT predicts that when individuals then violate the norms of communication, they're going to evaluate that interaction negatively. So on my first date, if they start asking me inappropriate questions, I'm going to violate, or I'm going to think that violation is the reason why I don't want to see them again. It felt inappropriate, it felt weird, and I don't want to hang out with them anymore. I don't want to talk to them anymore. But I think to myself, okay, someone who I know very well. I know my mom very well. And I think that I can predict how she'll react to certain situations within interactions. I can predict her norms within interactions just because I have a strong interpersonal relationship with her. First date, I don't have a strong interpersonal relationship with them. So there are ways that we self-disclose that are going to be considered normal, thinking about these different types of situations, the different contexts. And so what's appropriate versus inappropriate, that's going to be based off of your nature of the relationship. It's going to be based off of like what I think is supposed to happen, what's supposed to be. With EVT, you are trying to predict things and you're also trying to think what's appropriate to be asked, what's inappropriate, what's normal right here. I'm not going to get too much into this, but I do want you to be aware of the motives for self-disclosure. Why are we going to share our personal information? And so first off, we have social integration. For this one, you just want to belong, right? You're integrating yourself into a group. You're integrating yourselves with others, thinking like, hey, I just want to develop interpersonal relationships. I want people to get to know me. Now, we also have impression management, which I know has a lot here, kind of looking at it. But this one more specifically is to showcase your life in a favorable manner. You self-disclose because you want people to like you, essentially. Then we have self-descriptions here, which your book says, you know, talking about specific characteristics. Maybe here I'm here at work and I say like I am so organized, you know, and I'm self-disclosing like I can't go to bed until I clean up my entire apartment. I'm trying to like show myself in like a favorable light, which You can think about, it might hit other sections here as well. We do have accounts. So this one's our explanations for things, trying to explain why I'm a certain way. Now we do have apologies. When apologies are designed to convince the audience that something unfair happened. And so you want to be like, hey, this isn't what's really supposed to happen. We have entitlements and enhancements. This one looks at trying to explain a desirable event to maximize your desirable implications. You want to make yourself look better than you actually are. We have flattery, which you're using compliment so the other person likes you. And then the last one is favors, is you're doing something nice for the other person. This all involves self-disclosure, kind of at different levels. It's just interesting to think about these 6 ways that we can do so. There's usually a purpose as to why we're self-disclosing. We want people to like us. All right, so I told you I was going to talk to you about 2 theories, and this is our second theory, social penetration theory. Have you ever seen the movie Shrek? There's a specific scene where Shrek and Donkey are walking through an onion field, and Shrek is talking about how, you know, ogres are so, complicated, and that they're like onions. And then you have to peel back the layers to get to know them. And then that's how you can truly get to know them. And I just love this because this theory, check out the year in that first bullet point, came out in 1973. It's often known as the onion theory. Now, Shrek, I think it came out around 2000 or so. And they took this theory into their media. I think that's amazing. So, social penetration theory, you want to think about how we gradually self-disclose more to each other. It says gradually become more intimate based off of our communication behaviors. So I want you to look at this picture. And this picture actually has 2 key terms here that I don't have written, and it's breadth and depth. So you're an onion, and the breadth is like overall onion, breadth of topics. How many different things are you going to talk about with this person? There's a show on Netflix that I really love called Love on the Spectrum, and it's about people with Down syndrome and dating, and dating's already kind of difficult in anybody's life. And so people with Down syndrome, actually, no, it's not with Down syndrome, I'm sorry, it's with autistic people. And so they have a difficulty in kind of dealing with, keeping their mind on one track, thinking about topics. So with the breadth of topics, a lot of them, they ask questions about what's your favorite animal? Do you like cats? Do you like dogs? Do you like lions? Do you like dolphins? All this. And the other person's just like, yes, no, yes, no. It's like, hey, that's great. We're getting to know each other. But also it's like too many topics, right? Now, when we get into depth of topics here, this goes into how deep these questions are. So asking you what your favorite, animals are, if you like cats, dogs, dolphins, it's like that's not very deep. Now, if we're on a first date and I ask you when's the last time you cried, that's a little too in depth. And so we want to be sure that we're slowly peeling back the onion and taking our time. We don't want to just directly cut into it, right? So relationships begin when individuals they share non-intimate layers, which we're going to get to on the next slide, and thinking about how you slowly peel them off into more intimate layers. So think about an onion constantly, and I want you to think about that first layer. That's your orientation stage. You're just kind of communicating superficial matters. Your name, what you're interested in. Maybe you're in the same class. You're talking about why you're in this class. What's the weather like? Where you're from? Nothing too deep, right? Let's peel back that first layer. Let's get a little bit more in depth. And we have the exploratory affective stage. You're going to start disclosing your feelings a little bit more. So you share oh, okay, I'm from Arizona. I like it here. I hate the summer though. And then you start disclosing about how do you hate the heat, your preferences for things. And so you feel just a little bit more comfortable talking to this person, but also you're not talking about too much in depth. Now, I really, really want you to remember what I'm about to say right here. Most friendships And at the second stage, the exploratory affective stage. This is why, like, when it comes to friends, you don't talk about too many deep things. You do talk about your feelings, but it doesn't go beyond that. Maybe you have some friends that you never hung out with more than, outside of school. You don't actually go to each other's houses. And so a lot of your friendships end at the second stage. Please remember this. Our third stage is the affective stage, and this is dealing with more private matters. You're able to just share a little bit more deeper about yourself. Then we have the stable stage. I like to look at this as when you share your most intimate details with you. This is like the strongest that you can get with this person. You're not afraid that they're going to leave your life. No, you have a good relationship. Maybe you're at the core of the onion. Now, not every relationship is going to experience this fifth stage, but the deep penetration stage means you start decreasing your self disclosures because you don't want to hang out with them anymore. You're kind of like ending the relationship. And so you're casually, maybe you're slowly ghosting them, you're slowly fading away from them. But just remember, not every relationship is going to experience this fifth one, but some do, right? Alrighty, moving on from the onion theory, social penetration theory, we're going to get into the Johari window. I think this is so interesting because this looks at how much information we know about ourselves, how much information we know about the other, and then how is that going to like help with self-disclosure and us building a interpersonal relationship. So with this window, we have four different quadrants. And so that first one is open self. This is known to you, and this is known to the other person. This is information is known to both people. I think your book says here your open self is information about, maybe your attitudes towards something if you're like openly with them. A lot of times it can be your name, it can be like your hair color, your physical attributes. Anybody can kind of say this about you, and you also know this about you. Now, our hidden self on the bottom there in the corner, you know this about yourself, but the other person doesn't. And so you want to think like, I'm kind of keeping this information and I just have not purposefully shared it with you yet, which is totally fine, right? We choose when we're going to share intimate details about ourselves or just any kind of self-disclosure. And so hidden self is like, I just haven't revealed it to you yet. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Now we have blind self, which other people know this about us, but I don't know this about me. And I think this one's kind of, it's a little magical in a sense. You can laugh if you want, because this deals with like micro expressions. You don't know how you're going to react to something, how you non-verbally react to something, but they see the way that you kind of like smile about things. They see the way your eyes twinkle. And so what I like about this is like, we don't know what we look like. We don't know how we're reacting to someone, and maybe someone else does. Now, a good way to kind of combat this is to ask for feedback, which I think is kind of funny to ask your friends or whoever you're talking to, how did I react to this, right? But we're able to talk more with others and it's going to make us feel good. Now, our last one for Johari window is unknown to self. This one is unknown to us and it's unknown to the other person. I look at this as like secret talents. Maybe we just haven't gone through an experience before yet, and we don't know how we're going to react. So, with that being said, when that does happen, if it does happen, then we'll figure it out then. And so I like this one because I look at you as a dyad and what's going to happen. How are we going to like live life and do this, right? So now we're talking about listening. I think that your chapter, it focused a lot about like self-disclosure and what you want to share when people are listening. And so now we're going to get into a little bit of the science of listening and hearing. A lot of times people seem to get both of them. They think they're the same thing, but they're not. And so hearing means a passive activity, and you're going to perceive sound by vibrations through an ear. You can hear music from your upstairs neighbor, but maybe you can't understand the song that's playing. You know what I mean? You can feel the bass drum. You can hear it in your ear. And it's constantly happening, you hearing stuff. But maybe you're not consciously aware of what it is you're actually hearing. Now, if you are consciously aware, now you're listening. You're listening to the active process, you're interpreting a message. You can hear a specific song, you hear that it's a specific artist. And you are going to think about with listening, it's focused and it's concentrated attention. Have you ever had to like listen harder? I know that like whenever I have a difficult time hearing someone, I have to really pay attention to them. I have to really look at them and I have to really try not to like let any other noises interfere. We do get into critical listening here, and that's when you are still focused, you are still concentrating on like understanding what you're hearing, what you're listening to. It's that careful, systematic thinking and reasoning. What you're listening to, does it make sense, right? In light of factual evidence, does it actually like kind of all come together? I want you to take some time with this next section of your book because it talks about the model of listening, and it's a little intensive here, but they talk about the hearer model listening. It stands for each letter. And so first off, you're going to hear a message, right? Now, if you want to attend to it or not, that's your choice. But then you start understanding, what are they talking about? What's this person, referring to? And then you start remembering what they talked about, maybe what they've talked about in the past, and you're interpreting now what's going on here. What's your message that you're telling me? Then you start thinking about like, well, how do I evaluate this? Do I like this message? Do I not like this message? And then you respond. This model listening, it's on page 230 of your book. And it does go into with quite detail about what each one looks like. And so please take some time with this one. But you can see how you hear a message and then you cognitively go through a lot with the message, you're in a personal relationship with the other, and then you respond. There's a lot here. One of the last things I want to talk to you about is listening, and here's 4 listening styles. Now we have people listening, and what this means is that you are people-oriented listeners. You're really interested in, like, you're focused on the person who's sending the message. You're focused on this interpersonal relationship you have with them, maybe the emotional state of the person sending you the message. You are highly compassionate and you have a lot of empathy for people. You're focused on like, what's going on with you? Are you okay? And so whatever they're talking about, you're just making sure, like interpersonally speaking, they're well and you care about them. You're focused on maintaining relationships here. Whereas action, the second one, you are focused on, what do you want? I know I sound kind of harsh saying that, but the source of the message, maybe they're asking for something. And so you're trying to be very clear in your listening of like what needs to be done. Your book goes on to say that you kind of prefer quick bullet points. You want to know the information that you need to know. You're organized, direct. You're into like, let's get to the point here, right? Can you see the differences here? So far, people, you're more concerned about, your relationship and that person. Action, what needs to be done? Now with content, you're focused on the message and you're really focused on like digging into the message. Maybe there's a lot that can be said here. There's a lot of like complex information and you're trying to understand it. I know that I never did well in chemistry. And so I had to be a content-oriented listener here. I had to really listen carefully. I had to think about what was being said so I could kind of like anticipate, what do I need to study for? What do I understand? What do I not understand? Now, time-oriented listeners, these are clock watchers. They don't have time for you at all. It says here they're always in a hurry. They want a message and they want to speed it up pretty quickly. They think to themselves they can accomplish multiple tasks at the same time. And they might be overwhelmed by too many tasks. and they might have like too much to complete. Maybe not the best listeners. So whenever you're thinking about sharing a message with someone that has a time-oriented listening style, you might think to yourself, maybe I'll choose a different time. Maybe I'll choose a different channel and send you an email and say, when do you have time? Please read this. So we have to think about these different listening styles and how they hit different types of relationships and also like what you're aiming to do with this person. What's your intent? Here's my last slide for you today, and it's your listening response. So, yeah, we have different listening styles, and then we have to think to ourselves different listening responses of like how we are actively listening with others. Now, there's how many is there here? 4, 6, 8 different types of listening responses. And you can think for yourself like silent listening. You're just there, maybe you're nodding your head, nothing too intense, right? And then you might get into questioning. So when someone's telling you a story, you're able to ask questions to better understand what's going on. Maybe something didn't make sense to you and you just want to clarify it. This shows great listening, and I want you to think about in class. When you ask a question, a lot of times people they ask that question because they're listening and they're engaged with the material and they need that clarification. It's also a nice way to show like, hey, I'm actively participating. Paraphrasing is a great way to rephrase it into your own words. And people always say when you take notes in class, when you work on different class works, that paraphrasing what you're learning is one of the best ways to like solidify the information. Definitely do this because it will help you think about the information in your own words and help you remember it in your own words. Empathizing here is putting yourself in the same situation to understand what the speaker is going through. Now, this is very people oriented listening, and you're trying to understand why are they feeling a certain way? What would I feel like? And why are they feeling like this if it's differently? It's just a nice interpersonal skill to have. You can show support by showing that you endorse the speaker, you're there, you want to like support them in what's happening. And then maybe even analyze and like have possible solutions of what they could do, right? Now, a lot of times you want to ask someone, these solutions, you're considering them. Maybe you're not exactly sharing them yet, and that's our last one here, but let's get into evaluating. So thinking, okay, assessing the best course of action. There's a typo from your book. So thinking about the best course of action here, and if with your analysis of like these solutions, do they work, do they not work, based off of your feelings, empathizing here, then we can get into advising. Maybe they need counseling, something you recommend, offering information. I know that a lot of times I like to ask my friends, are you talking to me to vent or to actually look for advice? Because sometimes people, they just want to vent and they actually don't want any advice. So make sure that that's aware. But these responses, these are great for you to have a nice interpersonal interaction with someone and just engage in a good listening and competent communication. Cool. That was the end of chapter 7. I love talking about listening, and I also love talking about these different theories. So please give this chapter some extra love. I know it's a lot of content, but it's the good stuff here. If you have any questions, please let me know, but I hope you have a good one. I'll see you later.